Chapter 220, Fourth Amendment. Within 4 months of the mental torture of going back and forth to court, the state dismissed all of the charges after citing numerous constitutional violations, with the main one being a violation of the Fourth Amendment, which states, "The right of the people to be secure in their persons and houses against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized." In other words, to enter into someone's home, you can only get a warrant signed under oath by a cop and presented to a judge or magistrate describing exactly who and where they want to search and why. It's a document that has to follow a criteria for it to be approved and legal. In my case, the pigs had no such warrant initially, but after they raided the apartment, they went and acquired one. What I didn't know is police officers can actually raid your home without a search warrant, but to do so, they would have to meet a certain criteria. 1, if they see evidence or a crime being committed in plain view. 2, if they're pursuing a suspect and he runs into that home. 3, if they believe evidence will be destroyed. And 4, if someone is being assaulted or held against their will in that home. Then they can enter without the requirements of a warrant. None of these criteria were met on my case, and they had no probable cause for a warrant. I always took precautions, including not using cell phones and keeping an extremely small clientele. I didn't talk about my business to anyone, and I never pillow talked with women. I didn't have a problem with being in direct contact with the contraband because I knew what trust is. My mistakes were mine. My mind knew I could only trust me. Trusting others was a gamble. Seriously, a waste. You were putting your life in their hands, and it was the easiest way to a conspiracy case. If the one you trusted got busted and decided he was disgusted, no matter the instructions you thrusted on that buster, he may decide to say, "Fuck this." It was his. Fuck him. You were now dealt on a platter, bludgeoned, now being seasoned and placed in the oven. And you ain't even know it. You ain't see it coming. Blinded by the dead white men faces on the money. I also knew the law and had experience dealing with the Fourth Amendment violations. My last case was a federal gun charge that was dismissed because of a lack of probable cause. It was an illegal search. Case dismissed. I laughed at the pigs as I walked. I also knew that every case was beatable. My cellmate got caught red-handed with a dead body in the trunk of his car and had all of his charges dropped due to the lack of probable cause to search the vehicle. It was a humble. They pulled him over for running a stop sign, and even though he had license, registration, and insurance, they still made him exit the car and conducted an illegal search. They charged him with murder, though they didn't even know if he killed the broad. All charges dismissed. Lack of probable cause. The only way the cops could ever get me is hearsay or to break their own laws like they have now done 3 times. They broke their own laws to charge me with murders that occurred while I was incarcerated. They again broke their own laws when they arrested me in the Jag. And now they have broken them again by raiding my house with no warrant. They couldn't get a warrant because no judge would issue one on any cooperating informant's speculation. They had no direct buys or recorded conversations. I knew for them to justify their breaking of the law, they would have to break the law. They would have to fabricate a story to meet one of the prongs of entering into the home without a warrant, which they did. The defendant backed away from the door after being ordered to show his hands, in which the officer tried to grab him and he assaulted the officer. This is the story they created, and it fits the assault and the pursuing prong. They also claimed I had a .357 in my hand when I opened the door, which gave them probable cause to arrest me. The story fit the plain view prong. Knowing damn well if I had a .357 in my placement, it would have been .357 bullets lodged in their faces. The thing about lying is, the story has to be consistent with the others involved. And the liars have to be consistent with their lies. Lies always have to be in conjunction with other lies for the lie to work. Lies cannot stand on its own. Only truth can. Lies get resistance. Lies need co-defendants. Lies need accessories. Lies need assistance. The once untouchable Adolf Hitler said, "The bigger the lie, the more people will believe it." They dysfunctional. But then Machiavelli said, "You will never run out of people that's gullible, fuckable." Cops created lies in multiples, and liars get manhandled. And as the story gets longer and longer, the lies will eventually unravel. Cops are thieves, killers, robbers, and drug dealers. They use the cover of law enforcement, the badge, and the courts to aid and abet their activities. Every officer of the court saw major violations and illegal acts by the government in this case, but they had to do their duty. Protect their co-workers in the false imagery of a just system. They all knew it was just for just some. Everyone else was toast, and everyone else knew it was unjust for most.
I was in jail too, man. It's cold-blooded in the jail. You go down there looking for justice, that's what you find, just us. Gave one nigga 40 years, man. I saw the judge at 40 years straight up.
40 years, boom. That's right, fella, 40 years.
Chapter 221, Agenda. The struggle for prosperity comes in all forms. Everybody wants to be rich. Everybody wants more than what they have. Everybody wants to live a comfortable life without worrying about money. The men breaking the law to the men that enforce the law, and even the lawmakers. We all wanted the same thing. 99.9% of lawmakers were also lawbreakers. All for the cash. All for the paper. Everybody had a price. Everybody had an agenda. Our agenda was prosperity and peace and not allowing anyone to hinder that pursuit. Their agenda of prosperity and peace was to hinder our pursuit through robbery, not justice. Drugs weren't illegal because it causes harm. If that was a criteria, then cigarettes, alcohol, and white sugar would be illegal also. Drugs were illegal because it was a political issue, and at any moment the winds of change could blow. We didn't wait for the wind or permission to pursue our goals, just as they didn't wait for permission to steal or to violate the laws they swore to uphold. Our everyday battle wasn't just with other gangsters, cruddy women, and stick-up boys. It was mainly with police and politicians, the governmental flunkies, the governmental bitches. The cops vastly underreported the quantity of weed by a few thousand grams, and the money found in the apartment by the tens of thousands. Tens of thousands of dollars weren't reported on the search and seizure lists. They reported under 20 grand. At least 60 was missing. They also underreported the quantity of ecstasy by a few thousand. They reported over 1,500 pills. Over 6,000 was probably in their system. They were most likely pill-popping homos, cock-sucking suckers, coke-head lames, and dick-sucking popos. They also never reported the 15 keys of cocaine. They were there to rob. They didn't plan on any resistance, just to break in and enter in, a few threats, and leave with the contraband. I unintentionally shattered the plan because the plan was pathetic. Me running into the hallway and leaving blood on the walls causing them to have to call the medics. plus loud noises from the thumps and neighbors calling 911. Another thing they didn't report was the Mac 11. These type of petty smash and grabs were routine in Bladensburg, Maryland, a small town of less than 9,000 people. Though it was inside of Prince George's County, the police station had only 10 officers. They were poorly trained criminals that mostly tackled burglaries and robberies. They had never been forced to testify against high-powered lawyers. They had never been forced to corroborate their lies, and they had never been threatened with perjury. The case fell apart quickly, so I began to position myself for civil action in its individual capacities against the crooked pigs, crooked medics, and crooked politicians that happily assisted in this tragedy. Chapter 223, Fourth Circuit, 2006. The case was initially a state case and was eventually dismissed, and I was scheduled for release. I was taken back to the cell block and told to pack my belongings. I was going home. But within 15 minutes of telling me this, the officer came back and said, "Change of plans. The feds are picking up your case." Meaning, the federal government has decided to prosecute me for the case that the state of Maryland just dismissed because of constitutional violations. The Constitution is the strongest document in American system. In a violation of the Constitution, no case can stand. Yet, here was the federal government taking up a case with blatant constitutional violations. The feds always wanted to wash me up but was never able to accomplish their goals. But this time they thought they had me. This time the high-powered prosecutors appointed by Bush and had friends who were punished by the first in Kennedy killers had their chance for revenge. Even though my brother was serving 35 years and there was no more Benny Lee Lawson, the vengeful pig's plan wasn't concluded until I was serving an elbow or laying in a coffin. I would allow them neither. With the feds picking up the case after the state of Maryland dismissal, I now went from facing 10 years in state prison initially to 65 years in the feds with that one move. The feds was determined to bury me after their multiple failures. The case was moved from Upper Marlboro courts to the Fourth Circuit Court in Greenbelt, Maryland. It was around the corner from my junior high school and where Ralph McLean died in a shootout. The court had a 99.9% conviction rate. I didn't trip. I focused on that 0.1. The Fourth Circuit had the most conservative judges of all of the 11 circuits in America's federal judicial court system. Their 99.9% conviction rate was worse than the courts my brother was prosecuted in at 98.9. He was prosecuted in the D.C. Circuit in Washington, D.C. In the Fourth Circuit, it was guaranteed you would be over-sentenced or sentenced to the maximum. You could plead guilty to a 10-year agreement and get sentenced to 20. They would enhance your sentence on the smallest infraction from your past, like the theft of a bicycle. As I was arraigned in the federal kangaroo court, I took notice of its silence and cleanliness. State court holding cells were usually loud and dirty. Federal court holding cells were usually quiet and clean. State courts usually fed you bologna and cheese. Federal courts fed you chicken sandwiches and soda. Thought you was the macaroni with the cheese? Then the feds was just gonna fatten you up for the slaughter. It was only 6 holding cells, which meant not a lot of people came through here. Only the quote-unquote important ones. In this Greenbelt Fourth Circuit Court, They were now picking up everything from mobs and pistols. You can hear a pin drop in their bullpen. All you heard was sobs and sniffles. Grown men were crying after being transcended in a different dimension, threatened with 30 but get a 50-year sentence. Out here you get caught with that Ajax, you could plead guilty to 15 and get a quarter. Most people here put on their swim trunks and dived in that water. First chance they got. ASAP. People were being picked up on drug conspiracy charges with a multitude of co-defendants that they never met. They were meeting their co-defendants for the first time in the courtroom. One dude just got released from prison and got caught up in a new conspiracy within a few months. Now him and his co-defendants were all facing life sentences, and they were all being offered a plea bargain called "throw yourself to the mercy of the courts." It meant plead guilty before an indictment, and the judge would take it in consideration. Some people threw themselves to the mercy and got no mercy. They may have been on their third strike, and losing in trial meant a life sentence anyway, so they figured throwing themselves they may get some mercy. Some got a little bit of mercy, but not what they expected.